My family called me a failure and uninvited me to Christmas. You didn't even finish college. You're still waiting tables and washing dishes at that restaurant, they said. So, I decided to show up unannounced, with a surprise of my own. I'm Tasha, and I grew up in a small, two-bedroom house with my parents, Tom and Sarah, and my younger sister, Ella. Mom worked long hours as a cashier at the local grocery store, and Dad did whatever construction jobs he could find. They did their best, but money was always tight. When I turned 16, while most kids were excitedly planning their sweet 16 parties, I was filling out job applications at every restaurant within walking distance. I remember how my parents reacted when I told them I was looking for work. Mom barely looked up from the TV and said, "Good. We could use the help with bills." Dad didn't even comment. It was as though they'd already decided that my job wouldn't be about my independence, but about supporting them. I got hired at Mario's, a small Italian restaurant in town. Pete, the manager, was a no-nonsense guy who'd been running the place for decades. "You start tomorrow at 4, he said after our 5-minute interview. That first paycheck felt like gold, until I got home. Mom was waiting by the door, hand outstretched. "We need this for the electric bill," she said, pocketing almost all of it. She didn't leave me enough to buy school supplies, and when I asked for some of the money back, she acted like I was selfish. Ella, just 11 at the time, quickly figured out I now had money and started asking me for things: candy, toys, hair accessories. When I refused, she'd run to our parents, who would guilt me into giving her what she wanted. This became my life: school during the day, work at night, and studying late into the night. My grades were good enough to keep my dream of college alive, but balancing my responsibilities at Mario's and school wasn't easy. Whatever I could save went into a coffee can in my closet labeled college fund. But saving wasn't easy, not when my family treated my paycheck like their personal piggy bank. By my senior year, I'd been promoted to head waitress at Mario's, and the raise was my one chance to save more money for school. I kept it a secret for as long as I could, but eventually, they found out. Mom began planning home renovations we couldn't afford, Dad suddenly needed new tools for work, and Ella's demands doubled. Somehow, they made my raise about themselves. Getting accepted to the local community college was my miracle. I'd spent years working toward it, writing essays on my breaks at Mario's, studying during quiet nights at the restaurant, and saving every dollar I could. When I finally got the acceptance letter, I was ecstatic. Mom's response? "That's nice. But you're still going to keep working, right? We're counting on you." And so, I juggled school and work. My mornings were for classes, my afternoons and evenings were spent serving pasta and cleaning tables, and late nights were for homework. I managed to stay afloat, but it came at a cost. There were times I fell asleep in my textbooks, barely able to keep up with everything. Things took a turn in my 3rd year. Dad lost his job, and Mom's hours were cut back. Then, they dropped a bombshell: they'd taken out a massive loan for home repairs, one they couldn't repay. "Tasha, we need your help," Dad said one evening, showing me a table full of overdue bills. "If we don't get the money, we could lose the house." I didn't have a choice. I dropped out of school and started working full-time at Mario's. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd save up and go back. But before I could even think about re-enrolling, Ella dropped her bombshell. "I got into college," she announced one night at dinner, then turned to me with a look I knew all too well. "We can't afford the tuition," Mom added, her eyes locking on mine. Once again, my savings were gone, this time, to pay for Ella's education. Once Ella graduated, I thought maybe things would finally change. I had sacrificed my education, my savings, and years of my life to support my family. Now that Ella had her degree and Dad's loan was mostly paid off, I hoped I could focus on my own dreams again. But that hope didn't last long. "Tasha, we need to talk, Mom said one evening, using her all-too-familiar tone. Ella beamed, flashing an engagement ring that sparkled under the kitchen light. Jake proposed, she said, her voice full of excitement. That's great, I said, managing a smile. But weddings are expensive, Dad added, cutting to the point. Jake's family has money, and we don't want to embarrass ourselves. We need to make sure everything is perfect. It was clear what they were asking: more of my savings, more of my time, and more of my effort. For 6 months, I worked extra shifts to help fund Ella's dream wedding: flowers, catering, the venue, even her dress. Every time I thought the expenses were covered, another, unexpected, cost would arise. After the wedding, I made a decision: no more. I started saving again, but this time, I didn't tell anyone. I learned my lesson. The moment my family found out about my savings, there would be a new crisis that only my money could solve. Of course, the emergencies didn't stop. The roof leaked. The car broke down. The water heater failed. Each time, Mom or Dad would call, hinting that it was my duty to help. I'd listen patiently, but I'd offer nothing beyond sympathy. They had no idea that I had secretly re-enrolled in college through an online program. I juggled work and school again, only this time, it felt different. It was on my terms. Every paper I wrote, every late night I spent studying, brought me closer to something that was mine, something they couldn't take away. When I finally completed my last class and held my diploma in my hands, I didn't tell anyone. I carefully stored it in my apartment, far away from prying eyes. Christmas was approaching, and I was finally ready to share my success. Not only had I earned my degree, but I was now the manager of Le Chateau, the most prestigious restaurant in the city. I'd worked my way up from waiting tables at Mario's to running a restaurant where people waited months for a reservation. I wrapped my diploma in silver paper with a red bow, rehearsing how I would tell my family. For years, they had looked down on my job in the restaurant industry, treating it as something temporary or beneath me. I imagined their faces when they saw what I'd achieved. Finally, they'd have to be proud. But then, Mom called. "We're not hosting Christmas this year," she said abruptly. "Ella's taking care of it." "That's fine," I replied. "What time should I come by?" There was a pause before she said, "Actually, you don't need to come this year. It's probably for the best." "What?" "Mom, it's Christmas. I'm family. It's just. Ella's hosting some important people, and it wouldn't really fit." She didn't even try to explain further. She just hung up. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Uninvited to Christmas by my own family? I had to know why. I called Ella immediately. Before she answered, I opened my voice recorder app. "Hello?" she said, her tone sharp and impatient. "Ella, Mom just told me I'm not invited to Christmas. What's going on?" She sighed dramatically. "I asked them to tell you. This isn't going to be a typical family gathering, Tasha. Jake and I are hosting some very important people, his colleagues, my college friends, and a few successful relatives. It's a different crowd, you know." Her words stung, but I stayed calm. "And I don't fit into that crowd?" "Well, no, not really. Let's be honest. You didn't finish college, you're still working at some restaurant, and you've never really accomplished much. I mean, what would I even say to introduce you? This is my sister who waited tables her whole life." I felt my hands shake as her words sank in. "Honestly, Tasha, you're just not on the same level as everyone else who's coming. It would be embarrassing for both of us. You're a waitress. That's all anyone sees when they look at you." I let her talk, recording every word. The sister I'd sacrificed everything for was finally showing her true colors. Then she laughed. "Although, if you really want to come, I could use some help serving drinks. You're good at that, right?" Something inside me snapped, but I stayed calm. Thanks for letting me know, Ella, I said quietly, and I hung up. As I sat in my apartment, I looked at my beautifully wrapped diploma and the outfit I had planned to wear. My hurt was quickly replaced with determination. They thought I was a failure? They thought I didn't belong? Well, they were about to see just how wrong they were. The next day, I carefully rewrapped my diploma, making sure the silver paper and red bow were flawless. Then, I dressed in my best professional outfit, the one I wore to high-level meetings at Le Chateau. I wasn't just a waitress anymore, but Ella didn't know that. The drive to Ella's house took about 20 minutes. When I arrived, it was clear she hadn't exaggerated about the importance of her guest list. Luxury cars lined the driveway and spilled onto the street. Ella had pulled out all the stops. I walked up to the front door, my heart pounding but my resolve steady. Through the frosted glass, I could see people mingling, holding champagne flutes, and laughing to the sound of soft classical music. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. Ella opened the door, a champagne glass in hand, wearing a sleek designer dress. When she saw me, her smile disappeared, replaced by shock and anger. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, trying to block the doorway. "You weren't invited." I raised my voice just enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Ella, is that any way to treat your sister on Christmas?" Heads turned in our direction. I could see Mom and Dad across the room, frozen in place. Jake, standing near the fireplace, looked confused as he glanced between Ella and me. "Everyone," I announced, stepping past my sister into the house. "I'm Tasha, Ella's sister. You know, the one she didn't invite because she thought I wasn't, what was it? Worthy enough to be here." The room fell silent. "Tasha, don't," Ella whispered urgently, her face pale. "Oh, but I brought gifts," I said brightly, holding up the box. "After all, isn't that what family does? They help and support each other, right?" I walked to the center of the room, where an enormous Christmas tree glittered with lights and ornaments. Taking my time, I placed the box under the tree and turned to face the crowd. "You see," I began, Ella was concerned that I wouldn't fit in with all you successful people. She didn't want to have to explain her embarrassing sister. I looked directly at Ella. The one who she thinks couldn't even finish college. I opened the box slowly, savoring the tension. Then, I pulled out my framed diploma and held it high. "But funny thing about assumptions," I said, my voice steady, "they're often wrong." The reaction was immediate. There were gasps, murmurs, and exchanged looks. I saw Mom clutch Dad's arm, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. "Not only did I graduate," I continued, "but I'm also the general manager of Le Chateau." The crowd shifted. Several guests exchanged impressed whispers. They knew the name. Le Chateau wasn't just a restaurant. It was the most prestigious dining establishment in the city. Ella stood frozen, her face white as a sheet. "Tasha," she stammered, but I wasn't done. "And that's not the only gift I brought," I said, reaching into my purse. "Ella, you've had so much to say about this party and the people in this room." Luckily, I recorded every word. Her eyes widened in horror. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I already did." I hit play on my phone, and Ella's voice filled the room. "I've only invited people who can be useful to us. These are important connections, people who can help Jake's career, boost our social status. I've got it all planned out with the table settings. The really important people get the plates with gold patterns. The maybe useful someday crowd gets the silver ones. And the plain white plates? Those are for the people we had to invite but who are basically worthless." Gasps filled the room as guests looked at their plates, then at each other. Jake's parents, standing near the buffet table, set down their white plates, their faces flushed with anger. "Our plates are white," Jake's mother said quietly, her voice trembling. Jake stormed over to the table, his face red as he examined the plates. "Ella, what the hell is this?" he demanded. Mom and Dad stood frozen, their own white plates still in their hands. Dad looked at his plate like it was a personal insult. Ella tried to stammer out an explanation, but the damage was done. Guests began to leave in droves, tossing their plates and muttering insults. Aunt Margaret, one of the gold plate guests, was the first to confront Ella. "So, this is how you see us? Rankings and usefulness," she snapped. "How dare you?" One by one, the guests stormed out. Jake's parents left without speaking another word to Ella. Jake followed soon after, shaking his head. "I can't believe you did this," he muttered. Mom and Dad didn't say a word as I walked to the door. I turned back one last time. "Merry Christmas, everyone," I said quietly, and walked out. Back at home, I uploaded the recording to social media, tagging our relatives with the caption, "Here's why some of you weren't invited to Ella's Christmas party. Apparently, you weren't important enough." The fallout was swift and brutal. Ella's social circle collapsed overnight. Relatives refused to speak to her. Jake moved out a few months later, and last I heard, their marriage was hanging by a thread. Mom and Dad tried to apologize, saying they were proud of me and wished they'd treated me better. But it was too late. I needed space to heal. Now, I'm finally living for myself, saving money, taking vacations, and surrounding myself with people who value me for who I am. Do I miss my family? Sometimes. But I've realized I was clinging to an illusion of what I wanted them to be. They'll never take from me again. And for the first time in my life, I feel free. Thank you for watching the video. Subscribe and turn on notifications to be the first to have radish and real stories with you. Have a great day.